Most people think secrets disappear forever when someone is gone. I learned that wasn't true the day I found my wife's hidden case tucked inside our Christmas ornament box. What I uncovered would tear my family apart completely. The December air was crisp as I climbed down from the attic, carrying the familiar red ornament box that had decorated our Christmas trees for 37 years. My granddaughter Lila bounced excitedly beside me, her 8-year-old energy filling the quiet house. "Grandpa Frank, can I open it, please?" she asked, her blonde pigtails swaying as she reached for the box. "Of course, sweetheart. Your grandmother Maris would have loved seeing you help with the tree," I said, setting the box on our oak coffee table. The weight felt different somehow, heavier than I remembered. Lila's small fingers worked at the brass latches while I plugged in the bear Fraser fur we'd selected yesterday. The familiar scent of pine filled the living room, mixing with the lingering aroma of the gingerbread cookies we'd baked that morning. "Grandpa, there's a music box in here," Lila exclaimed, lifting a small brass mechanism from beneath the tissue-wrapped ornaments. I frowned. I'd never seen that music box before. Lila wound the tiny key, and a haunting melody filled the room. Maris's favorite song, the Christmas Waltz. But how could it be here? I'd packed these ornaments myself last January, 9 months after Maris passed. "That's strange," I muttered, kneeling beside the box. As Lila continued exploring the ornaments, I noticed something odd about the box's interior. The bottom seemed too shallow. Running my fingers along the edges, I found a small catch hidden beneath the fabric lining. With gentle pressure, a false bottom lifted away, revealing a compartment I'd never known existed. Inside lay 3 items that sent a sharp chill through me: a sealed manila envelope marked, "For Franklin, if it matters," a small brass key attached to a safety deposit box tag, and one of Maris's recipe cards with cryptic notes scrawled in her careful handwriting. "Grandpa, look at this pretty angel." Lila held up a delicate glass ornament, but I barely heard her. My hands trembled as I read Maris's note on the recipe card. "If you're reading this, trust Rosa. The key opens box 247 at First National. Franklin, protect Lila. They're not who they seem. N." My phone rang, jarring me from my shock. Mason's name flashed on the screen. My son, Lila's father. "Dad, how's the tree coming along?" Mason's voice carried its usual impatient edge. "Dana and I will be back from shopping in an hour. Lila better be ready for dinner." "We're just getting started," I managed, watching Lila arrange ornaments by color. Something in Mason's tone, a forced casualness, set off alarm bells. "Did you find everything you needed in the box?" he asked. The question seemed innocent enough, but the underlying tension was unmistakable. "Just the usual ornaments," I lied, instinctively protecting whatever secret Maris had left me. "Good. See you soon, Dad." The line went silent, and I stared at the phone. How did Mason know about the box's contents? And why did Maris warn me to protect Lila from them? A memory surfaced. Maris's worried expression last Christmas. How she'd insisted on packing the ornaments herself despite her illness. At the time, I'd thought she was being sentimental. Now I realized she'd been preparing. "Lila, sweetheart, how would you like to visit Miss Rosa?" I asked, referring to our longtime neighbor who'd been Maris's closest friend. "Right now? But what about the tree?" I looked at the bear Fraser fur, then at the innocent child who somehow needed my protection. "The tree can wait. Pack a small bag. Just for fun. We're going on an adventure." As Lila ran upstairs, I carefully placed the envelope, key, and recipe card in my coat pocket. Whatever Maris had discovered, whatever danger she'd perceived, I needed to understand it before Mason and Dana returned. Through the front window, I saw headlights turning onto our street. Dana's black Mercedes crawled past our house, slowing as it approached. Even in the dim evening light, I could see her pale face turned toward our windows, studying the house with an intensity that chilled me. "Ready, Grandpa?" Lila called from the stairs, clutching a small backpack decorated with cartoon reindeer. I grabbed my keys and coat, leaving the Christmas tree standing bare in the living room, the first time in nearly 4 decades that it wouldn't be decorated for the holidays. As we hurried to my truck, I couldn't shake the feeling that this would be the last normal moment Lila and I would share for a long time. The Mercedes had parked 2 houses down, its engine still running. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Dana speaking urgently into her phone, her lawyer's training evident in her sharp, efficient gestures. "Grandpa, are we in trouble?" Lila asked quietly as we drove toward Rosa's apartment. "Not yet, sweetheart," I replied, watching the Mercedes follow us at a distance. "But your grandmother left us something important, and I think some people might not want us to find it." My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Mason. I let it go to voicemail, focusing instead on the road ahead and the weight of Maris's secrets in my pocket. Whatever my late wife had discovered, whatever she'd hidden to protect our granddaughter, I was about to learn the truth. And something told me that truth would change everything. Rosa Jimenez answered her door wearing a flour-dusted apron and a look of surprise that quickly shifted to concern when she saw our faces. "Franklin? Lila? What's wrong?" she asked, ushering us into her modest apartment that smelled of fresh bread and chamomile tea. "Rosa, I need to show you something," I said, glancing at Lila, who had settled on the couch with her coloring book. "Something Maris left me." Rosa's weathered hands stilled on her apron. At 65, she'd been our neighbor for over 20 years, working as a cleaning lady for various families in town. People often overlooked Rosa, treating her as invisible, but Maris had always valued her sharp observations and quiet wisdom. I pulled out the recipe card and envelope, keeping my voice low. "I found these hidden in the Christmas ornament box. Maris wrote that I should trust you." Rosa's face went pale as she read the note. Her fingers traced Maris's handwriting with the reverence of someone handling a sacred text. "Dios mío," she whispered. "She actually did it. She left you the evidence." "Evidence of what?" Rosa glanced at Lila, who was absorbed in coloring a winter scene, then motioned for me to follow her into the kitchen. From a ceramic tea tin shaped like a rooster, she pulled out a small USB drive and a spare key I recognized as belonging to our house. "Your wife came to me 3 weeks before she passed," Rosa began, her voice barely audible. "She was frightened, Franklin, frightened of Mason and his wife." My stomach clenched. "What are you talking about? Mason's my son." "Sigh, and he's also a man who believes money and pressure can solve any problem." Rosa's dark eyes flashed with anger. Maris overheard them talking about Lila's future, about how much easier things would be if certain people weren't around to interfere. "You're saying they intimidated Maris?" "I'm saying your daughter-in-law is a lawyer who knows how to make problems vanish through legal channels, and your son had been preparing for your wife's passing since her diagnosis." Rosa handed me the USB drive. "Maris asked me to record something. I thought she was being overly cautious, but—" My hand shook as I pocketed the drive. "Rosa, I need to understand what's happening. Lila drew something yesterday. Stick figures of Mason yelling at Maris. I thought it was just a child's imagination." "That child sees more than anyone realizes," Rosa said, pouring hot water into 2 cups. "Last month, when I was cleaning Mason's house, I heard Dana on the phone with someone about accelerating the timeline and removing obstacles. When she saw me listening, she said it was about a real estate deal." "But you didn't believe her?" "I've been cleaning houses for 40 years, Franklin. I know the difference between business talk and something darker." Rosa stirred honey into her tea with deliberate movements. The next week, Maris called me crying. Mason had visited her at the hospital and brought papers to sign. Something about Lila's guardianship, if anything happened to you. The implications hit me like a physical blow. They were planning to take Lila. Planning? They've been working on this for months. Dana's been researching your finances, your health records, anything they could use to prove you're unfit to care for a child. I thought about the Mercedes following us, Dana's urgent phone call. They know I found something tonight. Then you need to move fast. Rosa opened a cabinet and retrieved a manila folder. Maris left this with me too. Copies of everything. Birth certificates, custody documents, medical records. She said if anything happened to her, I should make sure you got them. Inside the folder, I found photocopies of documents I'd never seen before, including what appeared to be an alternate version of Lila's birth certificate with different guardian information. Rosa, this shows Mason and Dana trying to list themselves as primary guardians even while Maris was alive. Your wife was smarter than they gave her credit for. She documented everything. Rosa lowered her voice further. There's more on that USB drive. Audio recordings of Mason threatening her, demanding she sign papers giving them full custody rights. My phone buzzed with a text from Dana. Frank, where are you? We need to talk about Lila's living situation. They're escalating, I said, showing Rosa the message. Grandpa? Lila's voice called from the living room. Can I show you my picture? We returned to find her holding up a crayon drawing that made my breath catch. The image showed a small figure hiding behind a door while two tall figures loomed over a woman in a hospital bed. The details were remarkably clear for a child's artwork. The woman's gray hair, the man's angry posture, the woman with short, dark hair pointing at papers. Lila, when did you draw this? I asked gently. Last week, when Mom and Dad took me to see Grandma Maris at the hospital before she got really sick. I was supposed to stay in the hallway, but I heard them talking loud. Her young face scrunched with concentration. Dad was mad because Grandma wouldn't write her name on something. Rosa and I exchanged glances. Lila had witnessed Mason pressuring Maris to sign custody documents. What else do you remember, mija? Rosa asked, sitting beside Lila. Mom said Grandpa was too old to take care of me if something happened. Dad said they needed to fix the problem before it got worse. Lila looked up at me with worried eyes. Are you too old, Grandpa? No, sweetheart. I'm exactly the right age to take care of you. I knelt beside her chair. Did your parents say anything else? Mom talked about moving me to a different school, somewhere far away where I could have better opportunities. But I like my school here, and I don't want to live far from you. My phone rang. Mason again. This time I answered. Dad, where the hell are you? Dana drove by the house and saw the tree isn't decorated. Lila's not answering her phone. She's 8 years old, Mason. She doesn't have a phone. Don't get smart with me. We're coming to get her now. Actually, she's staying with me tonight. We're having a grandfather-granddaughter sleepover. The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably long. That's not happening, Dad. Bring her home, now. I'm her grandfather, and last I checked, I don't need your permission to spend time with my granddaughter. We'll see about that. The line went silent. Rosa grabbed my arm. Franklin, you need to leave town tonight. Take Lila somewhere safe while you figure out what's in that safety deposit box. I can't just disappear with her. That would make me look like the kidnapper. Better that than letting them take her legally. Rosa stood and began packing leftover bread into a bag. There's a motel outside Millbrook, about an hour north. The owner, Miguel Santos, is my cousin. He'll let you pay cash and won't ask questions. Rosa, I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. Maris was like a sister to me, and that little girl deserves better than parents who see her as a chess piece. Rosa pressed the bag of food into my hands along with a thermos of coffee. Go, before they involve the police. As if summoned by her words, red and blue lights flashed outside the window. A patrol car had pulled up behind my truck. Back door, Rosa whispered urgently. My car is in the alley. Take it. I can't leave you to deal with this. I've been invisible to people like Mason and Dana my whole life. That's about to become an advantage. Rosa handed me her car keys and hugged Lila tightly. Be good for your grandfather, mija. And remember, sometimes the people who love us most have to make hard choices to keep us safe. As we slipped out Rosa's back door into the cold December night, I heard heavy knocking at the front entrance. Mason's voice carried clearly through the thin walls. Mrs. Jimenez, we know my father is here. We just want our daughter back. Rosa's response was perfect. I haven't seen Franklin since the funeral, Mr. Leora. Perhaps you should try calling him. Lila and I reached Rosa's old Honda just as the knocking became more insistent. As I started the engine, my granddaughter looked back at the apartment building with tears in her eyes. Grandpa, why are Mom and Dad acting scary? I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I promise I'm going to find out. I pulled onto the main road, heading north toward Millbrook and whatever answers waited in Maris's safety deposit box. Behind us, Mason's voice grew louder, more demanding, but Rosa's calm responses never wavered, buying us the time we needed to disappear into the night. The Millbrook First National Bank opened at 9 a.m. sharp, and I was waiting in the parking lot with Lila when the manager unlocked the front doors. We'd spent a restless night at Miguel's motel where my granddaughter had finally fallen asleep, clutching the angel ornament she'd grabbed from the Christmas box. Mr. Leora? The bank manager, a thin man named Peters, examined the safety deposit box key with professional scrutiny. Box 247 was rented by Amaris Leora. I'll need to see identification and proof of authorization. I handed him my driver's license and the manila envelope Maris had left me. Inside, along with her handwritten letter, was a notarized document granting me access to the box in the event she was no longer alive. Everything appears to be in order, Peters said after reviewing the paperwork. If you'll follow me. The safety deposit box vault felt stark and clinical, all cold metal and fluorescent lighting. Box 247 was larger than I'd expected, requiring both keys, mine and the bank's, to open. I'll give you privacy, Peters said, stepping back to the outer office where Lila sat coloring in a children's area. My hands trembled as I lifted the metal box and carried it to the small viewing room. Inside, I found items that revealed a pattern of calculated manipulation and legal maneuvering that sent a sharp chill through me. The first document was a will, handwritten by Maris and properly notarized, that I had never seen before. Unlike the official will that had been processed after she passed, this one included detailed provisions for Lila's care. It named me as her primary guardian and spelled out clear instructions for protecting our granddaughter from family members who place financial gain above a child's well-being. Beneath the will was a thick folder of correspondence between Mason, Dana, and various legal offices. The letters laid out a deliberate plan to have me declared mentally unfit after Maris was gone, clearing the path for them to secure full custody of Lila and take control of the inheritance Maris had set aside for her granddaughter's education. But the most damning evidence was a series of audio recordings on a digital device, each file meticulously labeled with dates and locations. I plugged in the provided earbuds and listened to conversations that shattered any remaining illusions about my son's character. The first recording captured Mason's voice clearly. The old man won't be a problem much longer. Once Mom's gone, we'll have him evaluated. Early-stage dementia, depression from grief. Any competent psychiatrist can build a case. Dana's response chilled me. I've already identified 3 doctors who will testify to his declining mental state. The key is establishing a pattern of erratic behavior and poor judgment. What about the inheritance? Once we have custody, we control Lila's trust fund until she's 25. That's nearly $2 million, Mason. Enough to fund your development projects and secure our future. I fast-forwarded through several similar conversations, each one peeling back another layer of their plan. They had thought through everything, from influencing Maris while she was ill to arranging my collapse after she was gone. The final recording was the hardest to hear. Maris's voice was weak but clear, captured in her hospital room. I won't sign anything that gives you custody of Lila. Franklin is her grandfather, and he loves her. Mason's reply was cold and calculating. Mom, you don't have much time. Dad is getting older and more forgetful. Do you really want Lila raised by someone who might miss school pickup or leave the stove on? Sign the papers, and we'll make sure she has every possible advantage. You mean you'll make sure you have access to her trust fund? That money should stay in the family. Dad doesn't understand investments or college planning. We do. Maris's voice grew stronger despite her illness. The money stays with Franklin until Lila turns 18. That's final. The recording ended with the sound of papers being torn and Mason's angry footsteps leaving the room. I sat in the sterile bank viewing room, overwhelmed by the scope of their betrayal. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, walked down the aisle at his wedding, had been planning to destroy me for money. Mr. Leora? Peters knocked softly on the door. Is everything all right? Fine, I managed, though nothing would ever be fine again. I carefully repacked the evidence, keeping the most critical documents in my coat pocket. When I returned to the main lobby, Lila looked up from her coloring book with a smile that reminded me so much of Maris, it took my breath away. Did you find what Grandma left you? Yes, sweetheart. She left me everything I need to keep you safe. My phone had been buzzing constantly with calls and texts from Mason and Dana. The messages had evolved from angry demands to legal threats. The most recent text from Dana read, Frank, you have until noon to return Lila or we're filing kidnapping charges. Don't make this worse. But I wasn't making anything worse. I was finally seeing the truth. Lila, how would you feel about staying with me for a while? Maybe through Christmas and New Year's? Her face lit up. Really? Can we finish decorating the tree? We'll get a new tree and decorate it exactly how you want. I knelt beside her chair. But first, Grandpa needs to take care of some important business. There are some people I need to talk to, people who can help us. As we left the bank, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Dana sat behind the wheel, speaking urgently into her phone. She'd found us, which meant Mason wouldn't be far behind. I helped Lila into Rosa's Honda, my mind racing through options. I needed legal help, someone who understood family law and could navigate the evidence Maris had left me. But more importantly, I needed to act before Mason and Dana could implement whatever contingency plan they'd developed. Grandpa, where are we going now? To see an old friend of mine. Someone who knew your grandmother well and might be able to help us understand these papers. Benji Torres had been my co-worker at the engineering firm for 15 years before opening his own notary and document services business. More importantly, he'd been the notary who'd witnessed Maris's hidden will, and according to the bank records, he'd helped her establish the safety deposit box. As I drove toward Benji's office, Dana's car followed at a careful distance. She was documenting our movements, building a case that would paint me as an unstable old man who'd kidnapped his granddaughter. But she didn't know about the evidence in my pocket, evidence that would expose her and Mason's scheme to anyone willing to listen. The question was, would anyone believe a retired engineer over a successful lawyer and real estate developer? I was about to find out. Benji Torres looked older than his 55 years, his hair now completely gray and his face lined with the stress of running a small business. But his eyes sharpened with recognition when I walked into his modest office with Lila. Frank, I was wondering when you'd show up. He glanced at Lila, who was exploring his collection of vintage stamps, then lowered his voice. I heard about Maris's safety deposit box. She made me promise to help you if anything happened. You knew about all this? Not everything, but enough. Benji led me to his desk, where several thick folders lay open. Your wife was scared, Frank. Truly scared. She came to me 6 months before she passed away, asking about legal protections for Lila. I pulled out the will and audio recordings. Did you know about these? Benji's face darkened as he examined the documents. I notarized the will, yes, but I didn't know about the recordings until now. He plugged the digital device into his computer and listened to several minutes of Mason and Dana's conversations. Jesus, Frank, this is conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly elder abuse. Can we use it legally? Absolutely. Maris documented everything properly, dates, locations, witnesses when possible. This isn't just admissible evidence, it's a prosecutor's dream. Benji leaned back in his chair. The question is, what do you want to do with it? Before I could answer, my phone rang. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Leora, this is Detective Faye Martinez with the County Sheriff's Office. I need to speak with you about your granddaughter's whereabouts. My stomach dropped. Is Lila in some kind of trouble? Sir, we've received a report that you may have taken the child without her parents' permission. I need you to bring her to the station so we can sort this out. I looked at Benji, who was already pulling legal documents from his files. Detective, I'm Lila's grandfather, and I have legal documentation supporting my right to have her with me. I'd be happy to meet with you, but I'll be bringing my legal representative. Sir, this doesn't need to be complicated. Just bring the child in and we can... I'll be there within the hour with all relevant documentation. I hung up before she could respond. Smart move, Benji said. They're trying to handle this quietly, which means Mason and Dana haven't told the police everything. If they had real evidence of kidnapping, they'd have issued an arrest warrant. What do we need to do? First, we make copies of everything, multiple copies stored in different locations. Benji was already feeding documents through his scanner. Second, we need to establish a timeline that shows your actions were reasonable and in Lila's best interest. As Benji worked, I called Rosa to check on her situation. Franklin, thank God, she answered immediately. Mason and Dana came back this morning with a police officer, but I told them the same thing. I haven't seen you since the funeral. Are you in trouble? No, but they're getting desperate. Dana was asking about Maris's personal belongings, whether your wife had given me anything to hold. I played dumb, but they're not buying it much longer. Rosa, I need you to do something for me. Can you go to my house and check if anyone's been inside? Already did. Someone's been through your papers, Frank. Your desk drawers were open, and some of your financial documents are missing. The violation felt like a physical blow. They broke into my house? Probably used the emergency key you gave Mason years ago. But here's the interesting part. They were looking for something specific. Your bedroom and living room were untouched, but your office was torn apart. They're looking for Maris's evidence, which they'll never find, because it was hidden where they'd never think to look. Rosa's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Your wife was always smarter than Mason gave her credit for. After ending the call, I turned to Benji. How bad is this going to get? Depends on how far they're willing to go. Benji sealed copies of the documents in separate envelopes. But Frank, you should know, this isn't just about custody anymore. With the evidence Maris gathered, Mason and Dana could face criminal charges for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted exploitation of a vulnerable adult. You mean Maris? I mean both of you. They've been planning to have you declared incompetent, remember? In the eyes of the law, that makes you a potential victim of elder abuse. Benji handed me one set of copies. The question is, are you ready to destroy your relationship with your son permanently? I looked at Lila, who had found a children's book on Benji's shelf and was reading quietly in the corner. Her innocence, her trust that the adults in her life would protect her, it made my decision easy. Mason destroyed our relationship the moment he chose to steal from his own daughter and manipulate his gravely ill mother. I tucked the documents into my coat. What do I need to do? First, we go to the police station and present your case calmly and professionally. Then, depending on their response, we decide whether to file criminal charges or focus on the custody issue. And if they side with Mason and Dana? Benji's smile was grim. Then we take this to the media. A story about a lawyer and developer conspiring to steal from a child's trust fund. The local news would eat it up. As we prepared to leave for the police station, Lila approached with the book she'd been reading, a collection of children's stories about families. "Grandpa, in these stories, the good people always win in the end. Is that true in real life, too?" I knelt beside her, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes it takes longer in real life, and sometimes good people have to fight harder. But yes, sweetheart, if we tell the truth and don't give up, good people can win." "Then we're going to be okay?" "We're going to be better than okay." I helped her into her coat. "We're going to make sure no one can ever hurt our family again." As we walked to the car, I felt the weight of Maris's evidence in my pocket and the responsibility of protecting Lila's future. My son had chosen money over family, manipulation over love. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated both his mother's intelligence and his father's determination. That mistake was about to cost him everything. The county sheriff's office buzzed with activity when we arrived, but Detective Martinez led us to a quiet conference room away from the main chaos. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd heard every lie and excuse in the book. "Mr. Leora, I appreciate you coming in voluntarily," she began, settling across from us at a metal table. Lila sat beside me, clutching the angel ornament she'd insisted on bringing. "Your son and daughter-in-law are very concerned about their daughter's welfare." "I'm sure they are," I replied, placing Benji's folder on the table. "Detective, before we discuss their concerns, I'd like you to review some documentation that explains why I felt it necessary to remove Lila from an unsafe situation." Detective Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Unsafe? Mr. Leora, your son is a successful businessman, and his wife is a practicing attorney. What kind of danger could—" "The kind that involves conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and child exploitation." Benji opened the folder and spread the documents across the table. "Detective, I'm Benjamin Torres, Mr. Leora's legal representative. What you're about to see is evidence of a systematic plan to defraud both Mr. Leora and his granddaughter of significant assets." The detective's expression shifted from skeptical to serious as Benji walked her through Maris's hidden will, the audio recordings, and the correspondence outlining Mason and Dana's scheme. "These recordings," Detective Martinez said, listening to Mason's voice through earbuds, "where were they made?" "My late wife recorded them during her final weeks in the hospital and at home," I explained. "She suspected something was wrong and wanted to protect Lila's inheritance." "And you're alleging that your son and daughter-in-law planned to have you declared incompetent?" "Not alleging. Proving." Benji handed her a thick stack of emails. These communications between Dana Leora and 3 different psychiatrists discuss the process for having an elderly person evaluated for cognitive decline. The timeline corresponds exactly with Mrs. Leora's final illness. Detective Martinez studied the documents for several minutes, occasionally glancing at Lila, who was drawing pictures of police badges on the back of Benji's legal pad. "Mr. Leora, this is extensive. If these allegations are true, we're looking at multiple felonies." She leaned back in her chair. "But I have to ask, why didn't you bring this to the authorities immediately? Why take the child and disappear?" "Because I needed time to understand what I'd found, and I was afraid they'd use their legal connections to suppress the evidence." I gestured toward Lila. "Detective, my granddaughter witnessed some of these conversations. She drew pictures of her father threatening her grandmother in the hospital. A child shouldn't have to see that." "Can I speak with Lila privately?" I started to object, but Benji touched my arm. "It's standard procedure, Frank, and it might help our case." For 20 minutes, Detective Martinez spoke quietly with Lila in an adjoining room while Benji and I waited anxiously. Through the glass partition, I watched my granddaughter answer questions with the serious expression she wore when concentrating on schoolwork. "She's a bright kid," Detective Martinez said when they returned. Her account matches your timeline, Mr. Leora. She clearly remembers the hospital incident and several conversations between her parents about your mental state and her living arrangements. So what happens now? Now I need to speak with your son and daughter-in-law, but based on what I've seen here, the kidnapping allegations appear to be unfounded. In fact, it looks like you acted reasonably to protect a child from potential harm. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. Dad, enough games. We're coming to get Lila now. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I showed the message to Detective Martinez. They're escalating. Let them come, she said. I'd like to ask them some questions about these recordings. 20 minutes later, Mason burst through the station doors with Dana close behind. Even from the conference room, I could hear his raised voice demanding to know where his daughter was. Mr. and Mrs. Leora, Detective Martinez intercepted them in the lobby. I need to speak with you about the allegations against your father. What allegations? Dana's lawyer training kicked in immediately. We're here to collect our daughter from a man who's clearly having some kind of mental breakdown. I think you'll find the situation is more complicated than that. Please have a seat. Through the glass partition, I watched Mason's face change as Detective Martinez played portions of the audio recordings. Dana went pale, her professional composure cracking as her own voice emerged from the speakers discussing my cognitive evaluation. These recordings were made without our consent, Dana said finally. They're inadmissible. Actually, Mrs. Leora, your mother-in-law had every right to record conversations in her own home and hospital room, especially when she felt threatened. Detective Martinez's tone remained professional, but firm. The question is whether you want to explain these conversations here or in front of a grand jury. Mason jumped to his feet. This is insane. That's my father in there, and he's clearly lost his mind. Look at what he's done. Kidnapped his own granddaughter, made up some crazy conspiracy theory. Dad? Lila's voice cut through his rant. She'd opened the conference room door and was staring at her father with confused eyes. Why are you yelling? Grandpa didn't kidnap me. I wanted to stay with him. The lobby fell silent. Mason's face cycled through surprise, anger, and something that might have been shame before settling on cold calculation. Lila, sweetheart, Grandpa's been telling you stories that aren't true. Come here to Daddy. I heard you yelling at Grandma Maris in the hospital, Lila said quietly. You wanted her to sign papers, but she said no. You said mean things about Grandpa. Dana stepped forward, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes hard. Lila, sometimes adults have difficult conversations that children don't understand. Your grandfather is sick, and he needs help. He's not sick. Lila's voice rose with indignation. He takes care of me and makes me breakfast and helps with my homework. You're the ones who are mean. The truth, spoken by an 8-year-old with perfect clarity, hung in the air like an accusation. Mason and Dana exchanged glances that confirmed everything Maris had suspected about their character. Detective, Dana said, switching to her professional voice. Regardless of these alleged recordings, my husband's father has taken our child without permission. We demand her immediate return. I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Detective Martinez replied. Based on the evidence presented and the child's own statements, I'm recommending that custody remain with Mr. Leora pending a full investigation into these allegations. You can't do that! Mason's composure finally cracked completely. He's a confused old man with delusions. I'm filing a complaint with your supervisor, and Dana's going to sue this department for— Mr. Leora, Detective Martinez's voice cut through his threats like a blade. I strongly suggest you consult with an attorney before making any more statements. The evidence against you is quite compelling. As Mason and Dana were escorted from the building, still protesting and threatening legal action, Lila slipped her hand into mine. Grandpa, are they going to jail? I don't know, sweetheart, but I know they're never going to hurt you or take you away from me. Detective Martinez returned to the conference room with a satisfied expression. Mr. Leora, I'll need you to remain available for the investigation, but you're free to go. And for what it's worth, your wife did an incredible job documenting their scheme. Without her evidence, this would have been a very different conversation. As we left the police station, I felt Maris's presence as clearly as if she were walking beside us. She'd protected our granddaughter even from beyond the grave, leaving me the tools I needed to fight for our family. The war wasn't over. Mason and Dana would undoubtedly hire expensive lawyers and fight back with everything they had. But they'd lost the element of surprise, and more importantly, they'd lost any moral authority to claim they were acting in Lila's best interest. The truth was finally out, and there would be no going back. 3 weeks later, I sat in Judge Margaret Brooks's courtroom with Lila beside me, watching Mason and Dana's expensive legal team prepare for what they clearly believed would be an easy victory. They'd hired Patterson, Seldor and Associates, the most prestigious family law firm in the county, and their lead attorney strutted around the courtroom like he owned it. But they didn't know about the additional evidence Benji and I had uncovered. "All rise for the Homerisable Judge Margaret Brooks," the bailiff announced. Judge Brooks was a stern woman in her early 60s, known for her no-nonsense approach to family law and her particular intolerance for anyone who put financial interests ahead of children's welfare. "This is a hearing to determine temporary custody of Lila Marie Leora, age 8, Judge Brooks began. "I've reviewed the preliminary filings from both parties, and I must say, this is one of the more unusual cases I've encountered." Dana's attorney, a silver-haired man named Harrison Seldor, stood immediately. "Your Honor, this matter is straightforward. An older man, overwhelmed by grief after losing his wife, has taken his granddaughter without authorization and constructed an elaborate narrative to defend that decision. My clients are devoted parents who are simply seeking to have their daughter returned to a safe and stable home. Mr. Seldor, I've listened to the audio recordings submitted as evidence. Are you suggesting those conversations never took place?" Seldor's confidence flickered slightly. "Your Honor, those recordings were made without consent and taken out of context. My clients were discussing legitimate concerns about Mr. Leora's mental state and their daughter's future welfare." "I see. And the plans to have Mr. Leora declared incompetent? The discussions about accessing the child's trust fund? That was all taken out of context?" "Your Honor, my clients have every right to ensure their daughter's inheritance is properly managed." "By whom? By the same people who planned to have the child's grandfather declared mentally unfit so they could control those assets?" Judge Brooks's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Mr. Seldor, I suggest you reconsider your strategy." Benji stood from our table. "Your Honor, if I may present additional evidence that's come to light since our initial filing." "Proceed, Mr. Torres." What Benji revealed next sent shockwaves through the courtroom. In the 3 weeks since our confrontation at the police station, Rosa had continued her quiet investigation. As Mason and Dana's former cleaning lady, she'd had access to their home computers and personal documents, access they'd forgotten about in their panic. "Your Honor, Mrs. Rosa Jimenez will testify that she discovered additional evidence while performing her regular cleaning duties at the defendant's residence," Benji announced. Rosa took the witness stand with quiet dignity, her Sunday dress and carefully arranged hair lending her an air of respectability that contrasted sharply with Mason and Dana's expensive suits. "Mrs. Jimenez," Benji began, "please tell the court what you found on December 15th while cleaning the defendant's home office." "I found printed emails about moving Lila to a boarding school in Connecticut," Rosa said clearly. "They were planning to send her away so Mr. Leora couldn't see her. The school cost $60,000 a year, and they were going to pay for it with Lila's trust fund money." Seldor jumped to his feet. "Objection! This witness had no right to access private documents." "Your Honor," Benji interrupted, "Mrs. Jimenez was performing her contracted cleaning duties. The documents were left openly on the defendant's desk. No laws were broken." Judge Brooks nodded. "Overruled. Continue, Mrs. Jimenez. There were also papers about selling Mr. Leora's house, Rosa continued. They wanted to put him in a nursing home and use the money from his house to pay for Lila's school. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Mason's face had gone white, and Dana was frantically scribbling notes to her attorney. Mrs. Jimenez, did you make copies of these documents? Rosa smiled for the first time since taking the stand. Yes, sir. Mrs. Maris taught me to always keep records of important things. The documents Rosa produced painted a picture of greed and manipulation that went far beyond what we'd initially discovered. Mason and Dana hadn't just planned to steal Lila's inheritance, they'd planned to isolate her completely from anyone who might question their actions. Your Honor, Benji said, we also have testimony from Lila herself, if the court wishes to hear it. Judge Brooks looked at my granddaughter, who had been sitting quietly throughout the proceedings. Lila, would you like to tell me where you want to live? Lila stood up with the serious expression she wore when answering difficult questions at school. I want to live with Grandpa Frank. Mom and Dad are mean to him, and they don't really want me around. They just want my money. What makes you think they don't want you around? Because they're always talking about how much easier things would be if I lived somewhere else. And Mom said I asked too many questions about Grandma Maris. Lila's voice grew stronger. Grandpa answers my questions and makes me feel safe. He doesn't yell at sick people in hospitals. The courtroom fell silent. Even Seldor seemed to realize his case was crumbling. Judge Brooks turned to Mason and Dana. Mr. and Mrs. Leora, do you have anything to say in response to these allegations? Mason stood slowly, his usual confidence completely gone. Your Honor, we were just trying to plan for Lila's future. Dad's getting older and we thought... You thought you could pressure a seriously ill woman, take advantage of a child, and dismantle an older man's life for money, Judge Brooks interrupted. Mr. Leora, in 30 years on this bench, I've seen many examples of family greed, but this is among the most cold-hearted. Dana finally spoke, her lawyer's training taking over. Your Honor, our intentions were misunderstood. We love Lila and only want what's best for her. Mrs. Leora, I've listened to recordings of you planning to have your father-in-law declared incompetent so you could access your daughter's trust fund. That's not love, that's criminal conspiracy. Judge Brooks shuffled through the evidence one final time before delivering her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, including audio recordings, documentary evidence, and the child's own testimony, I find that Mason and Dana Leora engaged in a systematic plan to defraud both Franklin Leora and their daughter Lila of significant assets through manipulation, coercion, and planned legal abuse. The judge's voice grew stern. Furthermore, I find that their actions created an unsafe environment for the child, who was forced to witness threats against her grandmother and discussions about removing her from her extended family. Therefore, I award temporary custody of Lila Marie Leora to her grandfather, Franklin Leora, pending completion of the criminal investigation into the defendant's actions. Visitation rights for the parents are suspended until they complete court-ordered counseling and demonstrate genuine commitment to their daughter's welfare rather than her financial assets. Mason and Dana's legal team immediately began filing motions for appeal, but Judge Brooks wasn't finished. Mr. and Mrs. Leora, I'm also referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. The evidence suggests multiple felonies, including conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and child endangerment. As the court session ended, Mason approached our table one last time. His face was a mixture of rage and desperation. Dad, you've destroyed our family over money. Was it worth it? I stood to face my son, feeling Lila's small hand slip into mine. Mason, I didn't destroy our family. You did, the moment you chose to take from your own daughter and intimidate your seriously ill mother. That money was never mine to hand over to you. It belongs to Lila, and I'll safeguard it until she's old enough to decide for herself what to do with it." "This isn't over," Dana hissed, as security escorted them from the courtroom. "Yes, it is," I replied quietly. "It's been over since the moment you underestimated how much a grandfather would sacrifice to protect his granddaughter." 6 months later, Mason and Dana were convicted on multiple counts of conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. Mason received 18 months in federal prison, while Dana lost her law license and received 2 years probation. The boarding school plan was abandoned, Lila remained in her local school, and I became her legal guardian. We decorated our Christmas tree that year with all of Maris's ornaments, plus a few new ones Lila picked out herself. As we placed the angel on top, the same angel she'd clutched through our darkest hours, she looked up at me with eyes full of trust and love. "Grandpa, do you think Grandma Maris knows we're okay now?" I thought about the evidence my wife had carefully gathered, the safeguards she'd put in place, the love that had reached beyond her absence to shield our family. "I think she's been watching over us all along, sweetheart, and I think she's very proud of how brave you were." As we plugged in the tree lights and watched them glow across the ornaments that had survived another year, another crisis, another attempt to pull us apart, I felt Maris's presence one last time, not as something haunting or distant, but as a